Tired of doing the same thing day after day? Seeing the same people talk about the same things? Hearing politicians promise the same BS?
Don't let anybody tell you that it's corporations and businesses that create jobs.
My change in party will enable me to be re-elected.
Too many OBGYNs aren't able to practice their love with women all across this country.
Well, you don't have to anymore. Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, your guide to traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about living the life that you want to live, where you want to live it. From beautiful San Miguel de Allende, smack in the middle of Mexico, with your hosts, Jonathan Lockwood and James Guzman.
Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about things related to living outside your borders. And today we're going to be talking to Claudia Moncarz, attorney and international tax advisor. James, you've spoken to Claudia quite a bit, haven't you?
I sure have, yeah.
So,
Hello.
Hey,
hello.
Claudia.
Hey, there she is. So, we've had a few of these podcasts rolled out so far, and we've talked to a number of different types of people. But I have to say, personally, this is where my greatest interest comes in. Claudia Moncarz is a tax attorney based in Miami. She has a Juris Doctorate in tax law from the University of Florida, and now has her own practice specializing in representing both U.S.-based and foreign clients in their business and investment transactions. Claudia Moncarz has been a frequent speaker at seminars on topics including tax planning, doing business in the U.S., estate planning for non-resident aliens, representation in front of the IRS, asset protection, and estate planning for non-traditional families. She's been named Rising Star by Florida Super Lawyers and appointed to the Miami Beach Commission for Women, where she chairs the Women in Business Committee. She is an attorney, mother, number lover, and world traveler. She was born in Panama City, but has since lived in Mexico and the U.S. and has traveled to China, Kuala Lumpur, Vietnam, and more. Welcome, Claudia Moncarz.
Thank you, and thank you for having me and giving the opportunity to talk to your listeners.
Fantastic. Well, James, why don't you start off talking to Claudia? How did you find her?
Actually, we just contacted each other. I contacted her off of the internet. I saw a webinar that she did. She specializes in kind of, international type of businesses. I saw that she was giving advice to people with location-independent businesses, and she seemed very informed, so I contacted her, So I just thought that she would be a good person to talk to. She's right up the alley of what we're trying to do here with the Borderless Podcast, as far as helping people, giving them practical advice on what it means to have a location-independent business, how living internationally might help you. And I think what she brings to the table is she can tell you how you might be able to save on taxes, which is just great.
Yeah. To Johnny, it's great. So why don't we, there's a word that is used a lot. And, Claudia, in our conversations before, you've expressed to us your concern that there's so much misinformation out there. Let's
There
just
is
go
so
ahead.
much, yes,
Let's
so
go ahead
much.
and deal with this term offshore. What does it mean?
Well, first, I'm going to talk from the U.S. perspective.
Okay.
And for U.S. person, which according to the U.S. government and tax purposes is defined as either if you are a U.S. citizen or you have a green card. U.S. green card. So for U.S. purposes, offshore means anything that's outside the U.S. So if you have a bank account in Mexico or you have an investment in the Bahamas, all of that is offshore.
Yeah, I think this word, I guess it came from Cayman Islands, Cook Islands, stuff like this, and people have this idea that offshore means, some guy with a briefcase flying in a private jet and delivering a bunch of cash. But all it means is, a bank account or a corporation that's not in your home country where you're a resident,
Correct. It's not as sexy, as exciting as it makes it sound. But
Right.
yes, basically you're outside.
And there's nothing illegal about having a bank account outside of your home of residence, right?
Absolutely not. Now we live in a global economy. Now you have, it is so common to have even what I call global families. You live in the U.S., but your kids, you're growing up there, may live in another country. They moved. It's just absolutely legal. The only thing is that with a caveat is, it is legal, but also, so it's not meant to hide money from the U.S. government and things like that. You have to report all this foreign investment or offshore investment. That's the only thing.
I think that's an important point to make. James has made this before. When people hear the term offshore business, they get suspicious. People of a certain sort, in the, trying to loopholes, trying to hide stuff.
No.
You can't hide stuff, can you?
No, especially nowadays. Oh, no. You are slowly but surely, the U.S. government, the IRS particularly, is going to find out about your foreign investment, and it's going to cost you more money. So you might as well come clean. They just want to know what you're doing. You don't have to pay extra taxes or pay, or maybe it's going to cost you more as an upkeep to have things offshore, but that's administrative stuff. That has nothing to do with taxes. So yes, you can do that, and there's tax purpose or legal purposes or just practical life purposes why you want to have an account in another country. You want to have your business be based in another country. There's many factors, but and none of them really tend to be with keeping things hidden, being on the slide, being shady. Is none of that. It's a legal thing, and you have a responsibility as a U.S. person to report these foreign assets. That's the only thing. So don't forget about that. That's my only always advice to people.
Excellent. So when people do things offshore, let's just use the term foreign. We're talking about bank accounts, and we're talking about businesses, correct?
Correct.
All
correct.
Right. And those businesses are often referred to as IBCs. Is that correct? International Business Company or Corporation or something?
Yes. Well, yeah, they have a different term for tax purposes, but yes, we can use IBC if that's what you're familiar with.
I see. So there are more than just IBCs that okay, understood. Why don't you tell us this? What is a reason why a person would want to have, first of all, a foreign bank account? Why would they?
Yeah. From a business perspective, you may want to have a foreign bank account because I had a client that she did some work for a foreign company, and the only way they could pay her was through a foreign bank account. So she had to set up a bank account in Panama so she could get paid. It was just business purposes. You may live abroad. You need a local bank where you live. It's easier to have your local bank where you are as opposed to having to figure out how to transfer money from the U.S. There's many life reasons, practical reasons that have to do with it. From a business perspective, you may be a U.S. company that have a foreign subsidiary, so you may need a local bank for there. There's many reasons that you may want to be.
Yeah, and let me add in one too. That I think is very relevant today, and that's just diversifying yourself politically. I think
Correct.
that a lot of people think naively, like, oh, I'm just going to open a bank account in my home country, everything's going to be fine. But actually, the biggest risk that I see today in today's environment is political risk. So as far as you never know what a government might decide to do. It's happened hundreds of times throughout history, confiscations and who knows who will get into office and what type of policies they're going to pass. But they could just take your money from you. So if you can, if you can have another bank account in a different country or several in different countries that are more stable, you can look at the jurisdictions that have a history of stability. Then that, especially today where you can open up bank accounts online remotely, then it's a no-brainer.
Yes, and I think some people also do it for investment purposes. They like to diversify it in currencies. So that's another reason why people do it.
Yes, and different bank accounts in different countries, not only will they have different options in currencies, but also different investment options. There are some, for instance, for Americans, since what we're talking about today, they don't have some investment options that other countries do. There are different types of investment packages and services that they offer in different jurisdictions that aren't available in the United States. So,
correct.
Okay, so then that pretty much covers bank accounts. What about having a foreign or offshore, if you like, business? Why would you want that? Why would you need that?
Well, I always say, when it comes to business purposes, here I really think your decision should be tax driven. So you want to pick a place where it best fits your business. Maybe, especially if your home base where you spend the majority of the time is not the U.S., maybe having your business in the U.S. may not necessarily be the best thing. Maybe you live in, let's say, Spain, and they have some particular like residency rules. So maybe it makes more sense for you to base your business out of Spain, even though you still may have to report the income to the U.S. because you're required. For tax purposes, it makes more sense to be in Spain. Or I know there's a lot of Americans that sometimes they set their foreign business in Hong Kong because it tends to be a little bit more tax friendly, that country. So it has to be tax driven. And when you have a location independent business, that's the beauty of it, is that now that a lot of our businesses are really heavy and based mostly in the internet, if you want, for lack of a better description, you can decide where your business can be. It doesn't have to be where you physically are present or the state where you came from. For instance, people that lived in California and then they moved to Mexico, their business doesn't have to be based, and they want to have a U.S. business. It doesn't have to be based in California. It really is. I guess I'm not giving you a one answer to fit all, but it's really a personal answer. It's a personal answer. It depends on the individual facts, what country they're going to, where are they mostly, where are they doing a lot of business, but it definitely should be tax driven. I believe so, because you're going to save, if you play with where your business is, you are going to save a lot of money at the end of the day.
Okay. And that's what I'm all about here.
Yes.
So I guess this is what we were touching on earlier. A person could open up their business in a particular district that is more favorable to them for a variety of reasons. But then there are these IBCs. Can you talk about what those are? Yes.
Well, for tax purposes, if you are a U.S. person, either a citizen or a U.S. resident, and that you own a foreign corporation, and they call it controlled foreign corporation if you own more than 50% of it, or a foreign partnership, you still have to report that foreign corporation, that foreign partnership. You still have to report the net income that you make from it, or the income that you make from it. That's one of the things. Also, there's a misconception that whatever you make outside the U.S., you don't have to report to the U.S., to the IRS. Mm-hmm. And that is not true. You have to report your worldwide income as a U.S. person. You may not necessarily have to pay taxes on everything, depending on what it is, but you have to report it. So all those, you have all this different, and I guess going back to the question, you have all this different type of businesses where there's partnership, a corporation, and then you can set it up. And you just, I guess you decide where you want to put it according to tax driven, and you still have to report everything back to the U.S. Just report what you're doing abroad.
Yeah, and this is a problem that is that only Americans are plagued with at the moment.
Correct.
So if you're a United States citizen, then you always have to report. And what is it, over $98,000? You're going to have to start paying income tax on the money you make over that. And the only way to get around that is to get a second passport and renounce.
Correct. Yeah. And just to make clear, there's a difference between reporting and paying taxes. Sometimes you just need to let the IRS know what's going on, but doesn't necessarily mean that you have to pay additional taxes or more taxes.
Yeah, but it's still a hurdle. It's a pain. You got to go and you are under their jurisdiction. So if they decide that they want to come and look around in your life, then the IRS will do that.
Correct, and I've seen them audit people that are abroad. Actually, you're talking about, I had a client that he was audited all the way from, he was in Argentina. So yeah, he had to deal with the audit all the way from there.
Yeah, I know lots of people that has happened to. I know some people it's happened to several times, and it's been so stressful. I know one guy who had a stroke because of it. And
oh my goodness,
I know all kinds of horror stories about that. So yeah, the only way to not be under the jurisdiction of the IRS whenever they just want to come and turn your life upside down is to completely renounce. So.
Having a
Yes.
foreign business, a corporation, a partnership or something like that, there's certain complexities involved in those over and above what one
Correct.
would ordinarily have. So it's come to my attention that there's a certain point at which they make sense, and prior to that, maybe they really don't because of that complexity or the costs involved.
Correct. I mean, yes, we all heard these stories, I guess, of how Apple has millions of dollars outside the U.S. for which they don't pay taxes for.
Mm-hmm.
But that structure is very complex. And yes, even you don't need to be an Apple to have that structure, but with this structure, even maybe not as big as Apple, if you have a business and you kind of want to not have to pay taxes on what you make abroad, you can try to replicate that, but it becomes cumbersome. And I know the reason why a lot of people move abroad and decide to live in another country is for simplicity, to make their life easier. They're
Right.
tired of the rat race in the U.S. They're tired of always, it's just so exhausting sometimes living in the U.S. that they move to another country to simplify. So it may not necessarily make sense, and I know people are not happy to hear this answer, but it may not necessarily make sense to have even though you live outside the U.S., to have your company outside, because you're still going to have to report it. Sometimes you may have to have more reporting. You have more administrative things to do, and obviously cost more because you have to pay for lawyers and accountants in another country and all these things that you may not necessarily have to do. So once more, it has to be tax driven. The reason why you're opening another country, you're choosing another jurisdiction, and make sure that at the end of the day, do the math and make sure that all the administrative work, not only time-wise, money-wise, stress, everything, at the end of the day, do the math and make sure that it makes sense.
Okay.
Because it sounds sexy, but it may not make sense for you.
Right. So I guess there's no specific answer for that. There are so many different areas where you can open up a business, and then the question comes, does it make sense to do that here, or does it make sense to do that at someplace else, or does it make sense to keep it a U.S. corporation?
Correct. And that's the beauty of tax law. I think it's like a puzzle. You just have to make clear what works for you. And then just like everything else, it's just like you want your business to work for your lifestyle. You can make it structure work for your lifestyle. Yes.
Would you say there's some ballpark figure? So say like you are doing business, maybe whether it's a location-dependent business or not, you're doing business in a different country. And, is there some ballpark figure as far as, okay, now I need to start thinking about an international structure. Maybe I need to talk to somebody like Claudia to help me set up something like this. Is there a dollar figure, like say, okay, now I'm making $100,000. Maybe this is the time that I need to set something up.
Yeah, it's definitely first. You have to be at least making over $100,000 in net profit. Like net profit, like where you're.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, yeah, because then it starts making sense to make it more cumbersome for you, adding the layers.
Yeah, because at $100,000, you can just take advantage of that foreign resident federal income tax exclusion.
And we're talking about net, remember?
Oh,
Because
right.
because remember, it's not only gross, because you get to deduct all the stuff that you're doing. When you travel back, some of that business travel back to the U.S., that's deductible. Some of the meals are deductible. Your internet is deductible. If you have a home office, is deductible. So we're talking about net, remember. So that's another thing that to keep in mind. Yeah.
Excellent. So give us an example of, if you can, I mean, you threw out Spain earlier, but can you think of any other tax advantages that are possible from setting up a location-independent business?
Well, it makes sense to, if you're living abroad, it makes sense to maybe have your business be abroad if all your income comes from outside the U.S. If you really are not touching the U.S., and then there may be some tax advantages to just having it outside the U.S. and then just giving yourself a salary and then paying taxes on the salary. So there's some advantage to that. If you have partners, another big thing, if you have partners that are not U.S. citizen, it definitely makes sense for them to keep it outside the U.S. I have a client that one of her partners from Canada, and they're gonna keep they keep the company in Canada for tax purposes because it benefits her partner a lot not to be be partner of a U.S. company. So that's another practical reason.
Earlier, you said U.S. persons was a citizen or a spouse of a citizen. I believe it covers a.
No.
Okay, what is it?
Is a U.S. person is considered a citizen or a U.S. Resident.
Okay, but is it not a spouse of a citizen also?
No, and that's the big thing. One big thing for those of you that are filing, because you have to file your taxes every year if you're making any money. Well, there's some threshold, but for the most part, you do. You should, if you're living abroad, you're married to they're married to a non-U.S. person, that they have no green card, they have no U.S. passport, they are not U.S. citizen. You want to file married but filing separately, because if you file jointly, then you have to report all of their income as well. So you want to. That's a big thing to do for those of you that are married living abroad.
Yeah, because I've just seen, especially with this FACTA stuff going on, that some people are getting, told that, they haven't been filing, or they have this bank account with people that had no idea that they were U.S. people, so-called U.S. persons.
Yes. And unfortunately, sometimes if your parents if your parents are American and you were born abroad and you really never really even have a U.S. passport, but you are a U.S. citizen. So, but there's a lot of, the IRS, even though I know they get a bad reputation, they're not unreasonable at the end of the day. So you can always explain and tell them your story, and there's always leeway. But yeah, you have to be careful even when you have a green card or a U.S. citizenship.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the spouses are not included immediately unless you bring them in because you filed jointly your tax return.
All right. Well, this has been really interesting, and what maybe we'll have some more questions for you in a moment, and we'll also talk about some of the ways specifically that you help people. But right now, we want to give attention to one of our sponsors. Today's Borderless podcast is brought to you by the Condescending Group, the online leader in promoting moral superiority. And right now, the Condescending Group is proud to introduce something they've been working on for a long time now, the Second Handers Card. Now, this is not just like any VIP or discount club card, not at all. Your application for the Second Handers Card will be carefully reviewed by the Condescending Group themselves for any signs of accomplishment or proficiency, which will get you immediately rejected. With the Second Handers Card, you can get into all the best parties, restaurants, bars, and clubs where people who ride on the coattails of others are warmly welcomed. And you can feel comfortable knowing others just like you will be impressed by your similar lack of talent, skill, or attainment of any sort. The Condescending Group's new Second Handers Card. Apply today. All right, so we're back with Claudia Moncarz, attorney and international tax advisor, on the Borderless podcast. So we were talking a lot about what offshore means, about foreign bank accounts, foreign businesses, when it makes sense to do it, why it makes sense to do it. Let's talk a little bit more about your business, Claudia. How long have you been in business?
I've been practicing law for about 12 years. Next year will be 13 years. Wow. And I have, just so you know a little bit about myself, I went to school at the University of Florida, and then I'm one of the few people that likes numbers and taxes. So I stayed an extra year, and I have a master's in tax law. And my specialty is advising in international tax. So if you have, I have three baskets where my clients fall. Either you are a U.S. person that's doing business abroad, or you are a foreign company or foreigner that trying to do business in the U.S., or you are a U.S. person that lives abroad and needs advice on how to do it. And you always have, I always want to say that you have a mission or a goal, and always by my personal or my business mission has always been to try to get this information out there. So once more, I thank you for giving this opportunity, because if you just, you can Google it, and it gives me a headache, all the misinformation and all the this organization that is out there in the internet. So I can imagine how more annoying or frustrating it must be for a person that don't even like this topic.
No, I thank you, because anybody listening to this podcast knows the idea of dealing with one government, if we're talking about the IRS or the United States government, is dizzyingly complex. It's almost unbelievable. And the idea that you have someone who's willing to help you not only with that, but get your questions answered internationally is, I can't even flipping imagine it. So what Claudia does, her gift is helping make sense of all of this for people. So sometimes people come to you and can you give us a little bit, obviously you're not going to mention any names or specifics or anything, but can you give us an idea about how someone has come to you with a challenge and you help them solve it? Can you help us with something like that?
I actually had somebody recently come that they are thinking of going, becoming more location independent, and just the idea of how to and run more of their business through their website and just all the logistics of how to do it. Another thing that, when you're, for instance, your website, you have to make sure that you're compliant with all, when you're collecting information, just simple as an email address. You have to be compliant with that. When you're sending out newsletters, you have to be compliant. You have to put disclaimers in your website. So things like that specifically, we talked about. Also, the agreements that you have to want to have with your vendors, or the structure of a company. So think different things like that, or if you're making an investment abroad, or if you're making if you want to do it in your individual name, should you do it through a company? Because, that's another example of the difference between the U.S. and abroad. Here in the U.S., if you die, you can give away your assets to whoever you want. But that's not necessarily the law abroad. A lot of countries have what they call is forced heirship. So you have to give it to your spouse or to your children by law, a portion of your foreign assets. So just planning of all these things. So it's not only for business, but also personal. Because if something happens to you, where do you want it to go? So those are different things on how I can help people. And going back to the webinar, how I first met James through, that is in my website, claudiamoncarz.com, that you can go ahead and you can download the webinar for free. And it talks about how to avoid getting in trouble with the IRS when living abroad.
Beautiful.
You said earlier that you go on the internet and you see all these things are not accurate. Can you give us some examples of some of the biggest things that you see, other than what we've already mentioned? What are some of the things that really just drive you crazy when you see online that you see a lot of?
I guess the big thing is that people still people out there that think that you don't have to pay tax. You don't have to worry about, if you live abroad, you don't have to worry about the IRS. If you work and live abroad and you move out of the U.S. a few years ago, you can forget about your tax purposes. I mean, your tax reporting requirements, and that really, I guess that bothers me, because now the IRS is really actively looking to who has accounts abroad. Americans have accounts abroad. That's like their pet project, and they're going to eventually find you, and they're going to find you. And it's going to be a big penalty that you could easily avoid it. Because I think as of March of the beginning of this year, they had in penalties and back taxes, they had collected about somewhere around $3 billion, the IRS. So they're making money out of this has been profitable, this whole thing for them. So they're really looking into this. And the other big thing is that people think, your foreign accounts, I know now people are starting to hear about this and they think this is something new that came out and this is like new thing and they get upset. No, this has been around for a long time. And we were talking about this before. Sometimes, I answer questions in forums. I'm members of some Facebook groups with Americans living abroad, and I tell them if there's a legal question, that's how I try to get information out there as much as I can. I answer it, and sometimes I had a few weeks ago, I had somebody keep on telling me that, no, I was wrong. I didn't know. And I'm okay. What can I do?
I think you mean filing the FBAR form, right? That's what you're talking about?
Yes.
A lot of people might not know. If you have a bank account outside of the U.S., if you're a U.S. citizen, anything over $10,000, then it has been the law for a long time that you have to file a FBAR form.
Yes, if you have more than in the aggregate. So you can have like 10 different little accounts for $1,000 each. You still have to file the FBAR. And it could have been any time throughout the year, yes. And that has been around for a long time. You know,
I think I'm under some wrong impressions about this. I've been hearing about these people getting into trouble, and it doesn't seem like they have a total of $10,000 in bank accounts. But over the course of the year, they maybe transferred more than $10,000, even though it never reached $10,000. In the whole, it did, as they were spending some of it. What's the deal with that?
Correct. It is in the aggregate. So, for instance, you had two bank accounts. Let's make life examples. And bank account 1 in January, you had $1,000, and in bank account 2, you had $500. But then you made a transfer in June. Let's look at the accounts again. In June, your bank account for $1,000 remained at $1,000, but your bank account that had $500 now went to $9,000 because you transferred some money. So now you have $10,000, and then in December you've been spending your $9,000 accounts. In December now, your $1,000 still is at $1,000, and your one that you had $9,000 in June now is down to $5,000. So it's not what was at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year. At some point throughout the year, you had a $10,000, so therefore you have those requirements. And you may not have $10,000 in each account, but in the aggregate. Every foreign account outside the U.S., in the aggregate, if at one point the total of those accounts was $10,000, you are required to file that.
Okay, well, it is what I thought it was. The FBAR. What I thought it was, let's say you have one account and it never reaches $10,000. But if you look at the total of transfers or deposits over the course of a year, it was more than $10,000, although the total never was.
If you ever had at the balance, what your balance was. Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Very good. Well, now I get it.
Yeah. And it's like I said, it's the aggregate of all your accounts, because sometimes people just think one account. And also, it includes account where it's not only your accounts that are in your individual name, but any account where you have authority or control of. So sometimes if you are, and this is where a lot of people talking that they wanted to let go of their citizenship because they can become partner of a law firm, because the law firm of, and this I heard about this, say it was an attorney in London that he couldn't become partner in his law firm because his law firm is a British UK law firm with no ties to the U.S. But if he became partner, then he had to report that foreign account to the U.S. and that law firm didn't feel like it. So he renounced his U.S. citizenship so he could become a partner in his law firm. Mm. So yes, because even those accounts that you are under control, you have to report the balance, the highest balance of any time in the year to the U.S. So you may not own that bank account, but because you're president, you're an officer that has authority over that bank account, then you have to report that bank account too.
Right. Would you do us a favor and talk to us for just a moment, if you would, about Puerto Rico? We've been hearing about this for a couple of years now. Some people are touting it as just the place to go, but upon closer inspection, it may not be for everyone.
Yes, Puerto Rico, it has unique tax laws. There are some things that are not taxable, and I don't know them all at the top of my head. I apologize. But they have unique rules that if you're thinking of going to Puerto Rico, you still get the benefits. But like I said, I just don't know them all, but they do have some unique rules.
Yeah, they got this. They got this new act that I think they passed last year. So now you can be exempt from some of your capital gains taxes. I believe there's some other things. So it's pretty much the only place in the world where you can be exempt from many taxes but by still being a United States citizen without renouncing. It's pretty much the only place. But I don't know. When I looked at it,
Yeah, I don't know. I guess if you renounce and you became a Puerto Rican citizen, is that what you're saying?
No, because it's a U.S. citizen. Puerto Rico is part of the U.S. So that's what I mean. It's the only place where you can be a U.S. citizen, and they've enacted this act. They call it the Act, and it makes you exempt from mostly capital gains taxes. So they're trying to attract all these high net worth individuals, and they have, I believe. Paulson, this guy's recently went down there and touted it as a great place, but that's because he gets most of his income from dividends, and so you're exempt from dividends. So for high net worth people, it makes a lot of sense. I think Peter Schiff's been talking a lot about it. He's moving his business there. So, and
I think that they have some special rules if you make money from Puerto Rico, and I know they have some. They have. Is any of there's a U.S. income tax for USB if you live in the U.S. and then if you live in any of the like Guam or Puerto Rico, any of those countries, there's special rules for them too. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of like in this limbo land that they're in. It looks like a hybrid, kind of like foreign. They're treated a little bit like foreigners, but not necessarily.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, for some people, maybe it's good. For other people, not. As far as I can see, I suppose if you're, like James said, high net worth individuals making your, income from dividends and capital gains, but I don't know that it really helps a person with their actual income tax, which is a concern for a lot of us. Right. So let me ask you this, Claudia, too. Are there any circumstances under which a person, a U.S. citizen, leaves the U.S. and, well, maybe they don't leave the U.S. They don't have to file a tax return. Say they're making money under a certain amount, for instance.
Yes, and there's that changes every year because there's a threshold, and that you can find. It depends whether you're filing individually or as a or single. There's a threshold of if your income is below a certain amount, then you don't have to file it, and it changes every year because that's tied up to the exemption amount.
And we won't quote you on this, but do you have some idea about approximately what that is?
I do not know it at the top of my head, but here's the one thing, though. Okay. Remember, when we're talking about that threshold amount for businesses, because a lot of us or a lot of people, that have their business that they just that they're not necessarily. If they're a single if they're a sole owner, it can go in their personal tax return. So they don't have a different tax return, and they get all their business from there. But remember, this talks about gross, not about the net. So if the threshold is, I don't remember if let's say is the threshold if you make more than $5,000, you have to file a tax return. They're talking about your gross here. So if you're a business and you made in gross before you took all your deductions, $5,000, you have to file a tax return, even though maybe your net was $1,000.
I see. Because
you have to show all the deductions that you took, why you don't pay, why the net was less.
So, are we ready to ask the big question here? This is what we try to ask everyone on the Borderless podcast. If you were talking to someone thinking of moving outside of their home country and starting their own business, what would be the most important advice you would give them?
From a legal and tax perspective, you should definitely make sure that your business is fitting your purpose, because you move abroad with an ultimate goal, whether to have freedom, simplicity, whatever it is, and make sure your business fits that. So your structure, even though I always say make it, it should be tax-driven, your decisions, but at the same time, make sure that it fits how your lifestyle that you want to have. So you have to make sure these two marry. So if it's more important to have simplicity, maybe you keep it in the U.S., even though you pay more taxes. You have to marry the two and make sure that it's still fitting your ultimate goal, because a lot of us become or I know a lot of my clients have become location independent for a more personal goal, and make sure that and that's what I always tell them, make sure your business also fits it, because all of us, all the tax specialists like to create the more complicated the structure, the more we like it from intellectual perspective. But I know what I like is not practical for my clients sometimes. So I let them tell me what is it that they need in their life, and I fit my plans to them. So that's, I always say, so yes, it should be tax driven, but make sure it fits your lifestyle that you're looking to have.
Excellent. Well, I've enjoyed this so much. James, do you have any more questions for Claudia?
No, I don't think so. But if there's any way that you want people to contact you, or you've already said your website, but if you'd like to kind of repeat that and any other things that you might be working on.
Yes, once more, you have my website is www.claudiamoncarz, MONCARZ.com. And there, like I say, I have, if you sign up, in the section of the website, you'll find a free webinar that it'll be emailed to you with information on how to keep out of trouble from the IRS. Well, how to keep out of trouble of the IRS while living abroad. And there's always a contact me section in the website. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. And if I don't know the answer, I can guide you somewhere where they can find. But the good thing is that there's more Americans living abroad, so there's more of this information of coming out and more of the right information is coming out. So once more, thank you for doing this, guys.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, folks listening to this, there are a lot of people who write about these topics, who talk about these topics. Claudia is an expert in these topics. So if you need help in this regard, definitely contact her. Her website, www.claudia, like it is usually spelled, Moncarz, yes. M as in Mary, O, N as in Nancy, C as in Charlie, A-R-Z as in zebra.com. Claudia is an attorney and international tax advisor, and she says your business must fit your purpose and lifestyle. So we've enjoyed talking with her on the Borderless podcast. Jonathan Lockwood here along with James Guzman, and we look forward to catching you during our next Borderless podcast, Traveling, Investing, and Living Beyond Borders. Until then.
Thanks for joining us for the Borderless podcast, Traveling, Investing, and Living Beyond Borders.